Hello, everybody. This is the Static Site Editor Weekly Synchronous Call. This is the engineering flavored edition. And on this Monday, the 24th of August, I wish you all a very welcome. Getting straight into some of the highlights from last week. So company group call was a big success and was well received. Thank you again to Eric for hosting that and the effort you put into the slides. And we rolled out the static site editor to the rest of the company and made them aware of it. And so we're starting to get some very valuable feedback already on that. So that's always a good thing. Then moving on to FYIs, in general, I've got a couple of things I want to mention this week. So this Thursday is our social meeting, but we've converted that into a virtual pizza party. So we're going to take a moment just to look back and celebrate the last 8 months, what we've achieved and accomplished. And also, I was speaking to Eric just now, having a bit of a talk and a look at what's next, what's lying ahead for us in the next 6 months. So Eric's been doing a lot of work around defining what the future looks like. And, we've got some ambitious and interesting things lined up, but we also have some very tangible things that we is clearly there for us to achieve in the next 3 to 6 months, and so we can start talking about those things a little bit. But mostly it's a time just for us to get together as a group and have some good times together. So I've put some notes in there. You don't have to eat pizza. You don't have to eat on the call. I know it's going to be like 6 a.m. for Derek, and and in midnight almost for Michael if he joins us. So eat when you want to eat, but feel free to expense it for that celebration.
For the record, there's nothing wrong with eating pizza at 6 a.m.
Oh, definitely not. And there's nothing better than leftover pizza the next morning. Breakfast of champions. So then a little FYI that GitLab commit is happening this week. I've kind of I've added the link there to the schedule. I've earmarked a couple of sessions that I want to visit. What's nice is that they kind of repeat across the 24 hours. So you're very likely to get a session in your time zone. On that link, just set the time zone to your local time zone and you'll get it in your times. So there's a couple that I'm really interested in that I'll be watching. But I do encourage you all to participate in terms of watching, and feel free to take some time to attend some sessions. The last one is we had a session with Marcia, our technical writer, earlier today, just talking about how we can better collaborate on working with the technical writing team. And there's kind of 4 points that I just wanted to highlight from our conversation there. So the first one is, let's bring the technical writer into the picture as early as possible. Once the MR is there and you've got something there, add a couple of bullet points in the document, in the docs, and start, even if it's just an FYI to Marcia to say, hey, I'm just giving you a heads up, this is coming. But make them aware of things that's coming sooner rather than later. The other thing is, assign an MR to the technical writer when they need to action it. Don't just ping them in the MR. They get a lot of to-dos from lots of groups. So if you can make it more explicit when they need to action something, it's better. If there's a delay, feel free to reach out in Slack to ask them or remind them or ask them if there's anything blocking them from having a look at it. And then lastly, avoid requesting MR approvals 1 or 2 days before the release post cutoff. So the release post cutoff is on the 17th. And Marcia told us since she had 30 MRs to review at one stage in 2 days, causing her to have to work kind of 11-hour days for 2 days. So that's not great. So let's be conscious of that and get our documentation in MRs. Documentation is part of the definition of done. So let's make sure we don't forget it. There was a good reminder for me personally, and I'll be looking out for those things where possible to help out. But if we can all just kind of like be aware of this and contribute to this, we can work better together. I will highlight that she did say we already work well together. So this is all about just let's be more efficient and let's be better. All right, moving on to the static site editor in the product. Enrique, can you give us a bit of an update on the work you've been doing as well as the feedback we've received so far?
Sure thing. We receive a lot of awesome feedback of people editing pages in the handbook with the static site editor. There are two main points that are worth highlighting. So the first problem that people is having in that process is that the handbook is using a different flavor of Markdown than the one that the static site editor supports. That is common markup of the GitHub flavor Markdown. As a consequence, when the static site editor opens a handbook page, it interprets that Markdown in a different way than the handbook. And sometimes that means that the Markdown is broken. And as a result, when that rich content goes back to Markdown, when we are submitting the changes, it is generating Markdown that brokens the handbook page. So we need to find a way of, the action item that we will take is that we will try to perform at the handbook pages in ways that they comply with the common mark specification. And that's what we will be working on this week. The second bug that we found that I think is also critical is about interpreting cram down attributes. So cram down has a syntax that allows attaching metadata to mark down elements like headings, lists, links, everything in Markdown. And again, the static site editor is not interpreting that correctly. And in the case of the table of contents, what the convention in the handbook is that you attach a class to hide those headings from the table of contents. And that is broken right now when the user submits the changes using the editor. So the action item is that even though it is kind of difficult to handle that right now with the tools that we are using for parsing Markdown, I think that we can find a temporary measure. Anyways, I have a link in there that I want to use this opportunity to share this with you, but I made a detailed analysis of why this is difficult. Because we have limitations with the Markdown parser that we are using right now. So it is worth reading in my opinion, but yeah, we are gonna find a workaround for that, and we are gonna work on all of that this week.
Awesome, thank you very much. Derek, can you give us an update on the front matter editing planning that's on the go?
Yeah, so pretty straightforward. We just finished our session and a recording link there and the doc there. High level, the planning I did is kind of on par. That's the direction we're going to take. It's kind of broken up into 13.4 and 13.5. So we're basically going to kind of go the simple route and then naturally iterate on it. So what that means is in WYSIWYG mode, we'll have a kind of a baseline UI, which is basically just going to be input fields. And then our next iteration is when we'll actually do the work to figure out what the config file, assuming that's the route we go, what that should actually look like to inform that front matter widget, essentially to provide kind of more first-class controls, like Boolean would be a checkbox, for example. Michael's shared an image design that actually showed an image uploading scenario. So that's actually kind of a unique configuration that we'd have to account for. So I anticipate an MR being per type as well when we iterate. So that should keep things kind of small. But no real showstoppers or anything like that. So yeah, definitely check
Great.
out the call if you're interested, or the doc.
Thank you for uploading the video.
And then, yeah, I guess that last piece I just remembered too. I don't know if this is a time to talk about that or more in a retro, or any thoughts, John?
Yeah, no, it's totally fine to mention. I think one of the things I asked Derek is to just keep this thought in the back of your mind that should we continue using this planning document that we use in Google Docs as an interim medium, or should we start off straight in the issue? I think initially when we started with this process, our assumption was that it would be easier to collaborate and make edits and stuff while we're in the rough draft phase of planning, and then transfer the information to the epic or the feature issues. My question is, I always want to reevaluate our assumptions and ask whether it would make sense to start straight in an issue, or whether the way of using a Google Doc is adding value at the moment. We don't have to answer that, but if you do have some thoughts on that, feel free to share it asynchronously with me. I'm just curious if we can keep this intermediary step almost in our process. If it's adding value, great, we keep it. But if it's not adding value, and we can go straight to an issue, then it would make sense to do that. All right, moving on to the handbook. So I just wanted to mention I disabled the merge train on the www.gitlab.com repo on Saturday morning at my time. There was numerous amounts of time the train got stuck last week. I have a suspicion it relates to the production instance we had on the Gitlab nodes. And Chad, you and I will talk about that later today, trying to see if we can look at that pre-built CI script to cache the repo, because it's adding a lot of overhead on the nodes at the moment, because that repo is so big and we have so many MRs a day going on that repo. That said, there is an issue to kind of automatically recover a stuck merge train. But even with the manual kind of workarounds that we've been doing last week, just kept getting stuck. And so I made the decision to disable it for now. That means we obviously need to be careful that we don't end up with a broken master. And if we do, we need to be responsive in Handbook escalation channel. So let's watch out for any notifications there.
So based on our last experience doing that, the broken master it's going to be inevitable.
Yeah.
It happened multiple times within a day. So
I think it's going to be a case of where the broken master is more frequent than the stuck merge train, because we had people essentially sit for 4 hours to try and get an MR merge. So it's going to be whichever's the lesser evil at this point, we'll go with that option.
So we've made a lot of assumptions for optimization, like for example, not running tests and not running linters on master for speed. So currently, if you just turn off the merge train, the result of a broken master is people don't find out about it until they're MRs, and then it's affecting multiple people. And then when you fix it, you have to tell them to rebase. So if we have to keep it turned off for an extended amount of time, we should consider turning some of the tests and linting back on master until then.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and we should just take that action to turn it on in interim until we turn merge train back on. So I'll take that action. All right, moving on to the next point. So the mono refactor is for moving the marketing site into the mono repo structure is happening today. So fingers crossed everything goes well, and then if Chad has no hair tomorrow, we know why that happened.
I haven't looked at anything about GitLab for a week, so I'm sure it will go smoothly when I do it this afternoon.
I mean, that was the whole idea. You come back refreshed, not overworked, so just go with it. What's the worst that can happen? Oh my, I just remembered this is being recorded. What's the worst that can happen? This might come back to haunt me.
No, this is our values. You
yes.
told me not to look at anything for a week, so I didn't.
I know. Thank you for listening to me, Chad. There's always a first for something, eh? All right, the last point there is just an FYI that Vasily created a linter to lint broken links and anchors in the handbook. And we discussed, what do we need to do before we just kind of like merge this and move ahead with it. And we essentially just, talked about when something goes wrong on the pipelines, especially when it's a linting thing, team members don't always know what to do about it. It's not always clear from the linting errors or something. And so Vasily and I brainstormed a bit, and we eventually settled on we need to create a page in the handbook that we can direct team members to when they run into an issue. So the common use case I can think of is that somebody does an update to the handbook, their pipeline breaks because of a linting error. They reach out to the MR Buddies channel, hey, help, my pipeline's broken. And the ideal use case for me is the people responding to that person should literally just be able to send them a link to say, hey, here's a link that describes the issue you're having and how to resolve it. And so that's the approach we've taken with the first iteration of this page. And the idea is that we'll build out this page over time with all the kind of like support that somebody might need to have. And I'll be asking the MR Buddies to expand on it as well as they get common requests around things being broken. All right, and then on to Bitlab Docs. Vasily, can you give us an update on the work that's been going on there?
Sure. So last week I was busy mostly with product tiers, and so a bit of words about what it is about. We have lots of links with anchors that lead to the headers that contain the information about product tier, for example, configuration, which is available only for premium. And in case when the product tier changes, we need to update all of the links, and it's quite an error-prone process that we want to avoid. So the goal is to remove all of the information about product tiers from anchors. And for that, I created a couple of merge requests, two of them pointing to GitLab main project, and second one is for Gitlab Docs. So on these merge requests, I remove all of the information about product tiers. And there is a third one that can basically all of the changes to the existing links. So I went through all of the docs, I went through all of the files that pointing to some kind of like doc pages and removed the information about product tiers. All of these merge requests are on review right now. And when everything is ready, I'm going to I'll probably contact a technical writer to help me with merging everything, and we'll assign a day and time and we'll do it.
Awesome, thank you very much. Right, Eric Eastwood, get our update for us.
So we finally got the Mongo database back running. That fell over last week. Jumped over all the snakes, and now that's running smooth. And I didn't want to make a release last week that made the export generally available for everyone, so that it didn't put extra strain on the database and make another thing fall over. So now that that one's up and running, I looked at Datadog, it was going smooth, so I made a release last week, and now user data export is available for everyone. And I see some stats where people are trying out a bit, so that's good to see. And then working on this week, finishing off exporting data for a room, so messages, room members, that sort of stuff. That's more domain specific for room administrator people.
Awesome. Lauren, anything relevant in growth marketing?
Yeah, well, the whole marketing side's moving, so that's very exciting. I will be around in the MR Buddies and Handbook Escalation channel to help out. The proof of concepts for our CMS is going to get completed this week. And I was wondering if you guys have a handbook page or any issues where you've gathered like requirements for the static site editor that possibly reuse, because I think the CMS and the static site editor aligned. So if you could link those, that'd be great.
Are you talking about feature requests for the static site editor?
Yeah, features, use cases. I think they'll be different, but a lot of them will be aligned.
Yeah, so I know we've had team members in the past open issues when they, I know Rebecca opened a few issues around features that she would like to see when we kind of showed her the direction of the static site editor. But I don't think we have a general. I don't know if we have an epic or anything that captures anything like this, Eric. I don't know if anything comes to mind.
Yeah, nothing that we've kept up to date. Early on we had a lot of like, big brainstorming documents about what could happen, and that could be useful. We can share those again, and then just our general maturity epics are probably the only thing that we have kept up to date. After that, we are probably gonna be doing a little more of that, like long-term thinking in the coming weeks. So we can certainly loop you in on that. And specifically, I've been working on the jobs to be done more formally as we look to expand into complete maturity and plan for that. So I'll include you on those, and maybe that'll be a good place to start.
That's great. Thank you. And the last thing that I noticed popped up last week is our community contributions are failing. The pipelines are. So I'm going to look into that and see if we can get those fixed.
Just, can you give us a quick 101 around the community contribution pipelines? How are they different?
If someone goes to contribute to the www repo through a forked merge request, the pipeline fails. And then if a GitLab team member then pushes a commit, the pipeline succeeds. So
that's something that I have not been testing for, so I would not be surprised if I broke it at some point with all of the refactorings.
Yeah.
And the one comment on the CMS, so the initial, I guess looking at that MR, my first question is the specific requirements of middleman, like how it pulls in partials and stuff. So whatever about that doesn't work, we're not worrying about it in this initial pass. Like if the page doesn't actually look anything in the headless CMS like it's actually going to look due to middleman specific stuff.
Yeah, we'll try to nail those down in the proof of concepts. Is where we can discover where some of those issues might occur.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it more. That and the assets is probably the biggest things we're going to run into, so it should be a lot of fun.
And there's talk of a digital asset manager getting included at one point that will intertwine with the CMS.
Yeah, I think the next big thing after the marketing site migration is coming up with a plan for the shared assets. The longer we delay that, the longer it will be this sword that hangs over our head.
And as I said, the only reason that we're getting the marketing move done and that I'm as confident about it as I am is because we've completely deferred all of the hard stuff that I talked about previously. So those are still left.
All right. The last point I have there is just an FYI for the growth marketing team. Lauren, I saw you commented on the MR already. We're moving to scoped priority and severity labels in the GitLab org group, and we want to replicate that on GitLab.com so that we have consistency with that, because we're doing development in GitLab.com, not just handbook updates. Right, and then last but not least, Eric with an update on product.
Thanks. So this week I'll be focused on direction page update, like I do after every release. And this one I think will be a little more significant because pending the validation from our survey, I think we're going to be viable in this release. We've shipped a lot of work that culminated in us being available, or the static site editor being available on the handbook. And that's a big milestone. So I'm going to be taking a step back on our direction page, thinking through, like I mentioned before, I've been thinking a lot about the jobs to be done, thinking through some more personas. It's going to be a more meaningful update than usual, and not just a date bump, and not just a shifting of epics on the list of what's next. So expect an MR in the next couple days, and I'd like input and feedback. If I'm misinterpreting something or misstating something, if something stands out as counter to what we've discussed in previous meetings, then please call me out on it. I think codifying our not necessarily exactly what we're going to do to get to complete, but our next phase of the static site editor will be important in this direction page update. So keep an eye out for that. And then I'd like to start the discussion about supporting more static site generators. I think that's going to be important in the coming months and over the next year to drive growth for the feature and support for people outside of just using the handbook. Not as many people use Middleman as something like Hugo or even Gatsby. Those aren't necessarily what we've been targeting. So my assumption is that we need to make a decision first on the future editor architecture. If that's not the case, please let me know. If we decide to switch editors, I assume we would need to execute that before even worrying about another static site generator like Hugo. But just wanted to start that conversation. Let me know what you think about it. If you see any major blockers that we haven't already been considering, now's the time to bring them up as we're architecting for the future.
So I
go for
still
it,
need to catch up, and this may very well have been discussed, but the one thing that I'm interested in is the discussion that was going on about decoupling the parsing of the markdown and that part of it from the rendering, and the fact that there may not be, one tool, especially Toast UI or any tool that does everything we want, and the best decision going forward is to decouple that. So if we've discussed it, don't have to go into it here, but that's the one thing I was really interested to see how it turns out.
Well, it's actually still in progress, and it's on Enrique's plate to drive forward for us. It's, I wouldn't say it's a done deal that we're going to have to re-architecture our editor going forward, but there's a high probability of that. And I think as we kind of like evolve and we explore and understand our direction and requirements going forward, it does kind of like start to seem like we want a little bit more low-level control of things to be able to be more responsive to the needs of what we want our product to do. But yeah, Enrique can tell you all about that, and he's documented a whole bunch of stuff in the issues already. So it's definitely good to catch up on all of that.
Great. And the reason I bring that up is because it's like, if that's the direction, the less work we do making Toast UI work in the near term is the better, which I think that's probably a reason why we schedule the front matter, because it's less dependent upon that while we sort that out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm not going to spoil my my speech on Thursday, but suffice to say, you'll hear more about that on Thursday, about the future. Just one last thing before we sign off. I remember now, Eric, there was Paul Slaughter created a website, Conventional Comments, which is done with Hugo, and I actually opened an issue asking him if he would be okay if we integrated the static site editor with that. And I was going to do it as soon as we had the handbook integration done. And now, since we have that done, I think I just need to take that up, because it will be a good kind of like a exploration to see what is needed to adapt. You know, is it as simple as adding the edit link to the site and it works, or is there more to it that we need to be aware of? So it'll be a good one to explore with.
Great.
All right. With that said, is there any other thoughts that you want to share before we all sign off? Anybody?
Oh, what time is the marketing site gonna move, Chad?
After 6 p.m. PST. That's the only answer you get.
Okay.
Right. I mean, technically, I need to rebase the MR. Hopefully, there's no big conflicts. The scripts I wrote automate all of that, and make sure it passes, and probably do one final pass to make sure I didn't forget anything, and then pull the trigger, like John said, sometime this evening, my time.
So the one thing I will say, Lauren, and you might kind of like maybe just reach out to the marketing side, is I did on Friday send a message to say if anybody has any open MRs that they would like us to help them out proactively to rebase it, that they should just add a link to the MR in our rollout issue, so that once we've done the move, we can go and help sort their MRs out for them. Otherwise, I guess it'll be, you know, tomorrow we'll get a bunch of requests in MR Buddies or Handbook or wherever in Slack, and we'll just respond to them as they come in. But we did double communication on this already, so I'm not too, I don't think you have to be online and waiting for this to happen. I don't think it's that needed. And we're specifically doing it after hours, American time zone today. So that the bulk of the kind of like issues might only come through tomorrow.
And our past experience and hope is that Git seems to be pretty smart about being able to handle files which have been moved, like before or after the edit and during rebases. So we're hoping this is minimal disruption, but it's obviously a lot more files in the handbook, so we'll see.
Famous last words.
Here we go.
All right. Okay, everybody, have a great day further.